These are the Code of Federal Regulations. They begin at 34 CFR. CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulations 300.001. Specifically, the IEP information begins at section 300.320 with the definition of an individualized education program. During this presentation, you can see that there are some areas marked in yellow and some areas marked in blue. The yellow is things that we covered in the simplified overview of the rules and regulations, so I'll cover those real quickly. The blue sections involve generally children that are 0 to 3, which we don't cover in any of our presentations. That's called Part C of IDEA. We cover Part B of IDEA, which is ages 3 to 21. And some of the other blue areas are on transition, and we cover transition in more detail in another section. So if you want to go to the transition section and take a look at it, it's done in much more detail and a better description. So the definition of an individualized education program. IEP is a written statement which states the present levels of performance, how the disability affects the child, and it has measurable annual goals. The IEP also contains a description of benchmarks or short-term objectives. These are the steps that are taken to meet the annual goals to show your child's progress, and they're periodically issued. They could be 4 times a year, they can be 6 times a year, they can be more often. It really depends on the need of your child. An IEP also includes a statement of special education and any related services that are necessary, any supplementary aids or services, and modifications and support. The IEP must also include an explanation that your child's not in the regular classroom. So let's say your child's in the regular classroom 80% of the time and 20% is in special ed. There needs to be an explanation on why your child's spending 20% of his time in special education. There needs to be a statement on any accommodations that your child may need to take district-wide assessments. If they're not taking the district-wide assessment, then the school must explain why your child cannot participate in the regular assessment and why they're choosing the alternative assessment that they're choosing to give to your child. The IEP also has the date of beginning the services, how often they happen, location, duration. That would be like speech language pathology. You'd have it 4 times a week for 30 minutes at the speech language pathologist's office. There also needs to be transition goals included in the IEP, and this talks a little bit about those. Like I said, we have a section that goes into that in more detail. And here's just a short statement about when your child turns 18, or in Nebraska it's 19 years of age, and then it tells what needs to happen there. The next section of the Federal Rules and Regulations is section 300.321 on the IEP team, and it includes the mandatory participants, which are the parents, one regular classroom teacher, a special ed teacher, a representative from the public agency who can make decisions to provide services at the meeting, and an individual who can interpret evaluation results. Others that are not mandatory that may be there at the discretion of the parents are the school. For example, you as a parent could take an advocate, you could take another parent for support. You can invite them to the IEP meeting, and whenever appropriate, the child with a disability, particularly during the transition stage, and then also during the transition stage, there may be a public agency that your child is transitioning to, whether that be vocational rehabilitation or a college or wherever. They may be at the meeting also to discuss transition services. The key is everybody has to have special knowledge and special expertise about your child and where they're going and what they're doing with their education. This section involves who the public agency representative can be. It could be a lot of different people. It could be the principal, it could be the special ed director, it could be the regular classroom teacher, the special ed teacher. As long as somebody's there who can make decisions at the meeting to provide services for your child, they're a mandatory participant and they have to be there. These sections here are somewhat new to IDEA. What they do is give some flexibility to the school if services that an individual is providing, whether they be education or related services, are not being modified or discussed, then they can be excused from the meeting. That's with your permission, and the school will ask you for that. Also, a team member could participate in writing instead of in person. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the notification, but that's also up to you. If you want to have them there, just let the school know and they will have them there. Otherwise, this gives some flexibility for their attendance. The next section, 300.322, is parental participation. And this is done in a number of different ways. One of them is notifying the parents. We do have a section that goes specifically into this that is under the IEP forms. It's called the notification of IEP meeting. That one will take you through this step by step and is a lot more detailed. So take a look at that. The meeting is scheduled at an agreeable time and place. The notice contains the purpose of the meeting, location, time, who's going to be at the meeting, and if you're at the transition stage, that the child will be invited and there may be other agency individuals there. Congress also considered it extremely important that the parents participate in the IEP meeting. And if you need to do some creative methods to get that participation, you can, such as conference, telephone calls, those type of things. If the parent cannot be at the meeting, then the school has to indicate that they've made telephone calls to the parents, keep a log of that, keep copies of any letters they sent to the parents saying, hey, we're having an IEP meeting, please be there. Detailed records of visitations to home or work. Congress really wanted parental participation at the IEP meeting, so all these things are required of the school if a parent doesn't attend. Also, to ensure participation, if an interpreter is necessary, whether that be Spanish, English, or some other language, then they need to be present. If a sign language interpreter needs to be present, they should be invited to the meeting also so that the parents can actively participate in the meeting. Finally, the parents are given a copy of their child's IEP to ensure that progress is being made towards the annual goals. The next section, 300.323, is when IEPs must be in effect, preferably that they're in effect at the beginning of the year so your child can get off to a running start with all of his special education and related services in place. Whether a child, and this is for a child 4 or 5 years old, whether they should have an IEP or an IFSP. An IFSP is an individualized family service plan that's usually for 0 to 3-year-olds. It can be for 4 or 5-year-olds. That's not often the case, but once in a while it is. The school will explain all this to you, the differences between the two, and really the decision is made upon which is better for your child. If you have questions about this, feel free to contact advocates or talk to your school. They can explain it. Initial IEPs, new IEPs must be developed after the evaluation within 30 days and services be put in place as soon as possible thereafter. Everybody should have access to the IEP that's involved. This includes the regular classroom teacher, the special ed teacher, any related service providers, physical therapists. Anybody else that's responsible for the child should all have a copy of the IEP so that they know their specific responsibilities to help the child be educated and to assist to make sure that all accommodations, modification, and supports are in place. For children who transfer from one school district to another within the same state, then the new school district can either adopt the current IEP that the child has or implement a new one. Usually they do an evaluation and then do an IEP. For children who transfer from another state, it's mandatory that the school district conduct an evaluation and then implement a new IEP. That is, have the meeting within 30 days and services provided as soon as possible thereafter. This section is on your child's records. They generally follow your child. That's usually what happens. If it doesn't happen, there's some affirmative duties here for your school, your current school, to try to get those records. The next section, 300.324, is on developing, reviewing, and revising an IEP. What you must consider: strengths of the child, concerns of the parent, any other evaluations that have been done, the needs of the child. Special considerations include the use of positive behavioral interventions, whether the child is proficient in English or not. Instruction needs to be provided in Braille if necessary. Necessary services for children who have hearing issues needs to be considered. Assistive technology devices and services are specifically laid out, and they've done really well with assistive technology devices and services. For physical disabilities as well as mental disabilities, they've come up with some real inventive strategies, so check into that also. The regular classroom teacher needs to be there, and that's because the regular classroom teacher deals with your child every day and comes up often with some really good solutions to any barriers that the team is encountering. These sections allow some flexibility to school districts on amending the IEP without a full-blown meeting. The key is that if you and the school agree to that any changes made in the IEP, all the service providers are notified of that. IEPs must be revised at least annually. It can be more often if you're seeing problems. Things that need to be addressed is lack of expected progress, any reevaluations that are done, any more information from doctors and others that you have about the child's needs, any other matters. And there's some final wording in here about transition. Once again, go to the transition section for a more detailed explanation. The final section here deals with children who are in adult prisons. There's special requirements for them. You can read through this. This gives you an outline. If you do run into this issue, it's important that you contact an advocate or Legal Aid of Nebraska to assist you in this area. Somewhat complicated, but here's the outline for it if you want to take a look at it. The final section, 300.325, deals with private school placements by public agencies. The key here is that the school district, your current school district, still has a responsibility for your child, so they have a meeting before the placement with the facility that your child is going to be transferred to present. When the IEP is reviewed and revised, it can be by the private placement agency, but the school district's still responsible to make sure you, the parent, are involved in any changes that you agree to. But as I stated before, the responsibility still lies with your current school district to make sure your child is receiving special education and related services. And that is the rules and regulations on IEPs.